Most people think they're lazy. They tell themselves they lack discipline. They assume something is wrong with them, that they're broken, unmotivated, behind. But laziness doesn't usually feel like heaviness. It feels light. It feels indifferent. What most people feel is heavy. Heavy when they think about their future. Heavy when they think about their work. Heavy when they think about what comes next. That's not laziness. That's resistance. Not resistance to effort, resistance to the direction you're heading. You can work hard at things you care about. You can stay up late for things that matter. You can push through discomfort when it feels meaningful. But when the life in front of you doesn't feel like yours, your body knows, before your mind does. So everything feels harder. Not because you're incapable, but because some part of you doesn't want to move toward that future. You call it procrastination. You call it distraction. You call it a lack of willpower. But underneath, there's usually a quieter truth. You don't actually want the future you're moving toward. When you imagine this future actually arriving, what part of you tightens? That's a hard thing to admit, because it means acknowledging that you've been aiming at something that doesn't fit. Most people would rather believe they're lazy than admit they've been chasing the wrong life. Laziness is safer. It keeps your identity intact. I'm just bad at execution, not I don't want this path. Here's something uncomfortable. If you suddenly woke up tomorrow living the exact life you're currently working toward, would you feel excited or trapped? That answer matters. You don't resist what you deeply want. You resist what you feel forced into. A lot of people mistake resistance for weakness, but most of the time, it's grief. Grief for a version of life you thought you were supposed to want. Grief for an identity you've been performing. Grief for realizing that you've been trying to convince yourself instead of listening to yourself. Because admitting you don't want this path means admitting you don't know what the right path is yet. And uncertainty feels scarier than staying uncomfortable. So you stay. Not because you're incapable, not because you're broken, but because the unknown feels heavier than the familiar. Sometimes your lack of motivation is awareness. It's information, not a flaw. And that doesn't mean you stop taking responsibility. It doesn't mean you do nothing. It means you get honest. Honest about what feels dead. Honest about what feels draining. Honest about what you're only doing because it looks reasonable. Because forcing yourself to move toward a life you don't want will always feel like pushing uphill. You don't need more hacks. You don't need a better routine. You don't need to become a different person. You may need to admit, I don't want this version of my future. That sentence alone changes the direction of everything. Most people aren't lazy. They're loyal to a life they no longer want. So maybe the real question isn't, how do I become more disciplined? Maybe it's, what kind of life would I actually want to wake up to?